while we're going to be gathering together, so today I would like to talk about only parents visa options. Reason for that is because that's on a very hot topic at this moment of time. The borders were reopened for parents from November this year, and a lot of people haven't seen parents for a very long time during pandemic. So I decided I do specific session in regards to that because it's going to be very useful and helpful for anyone who would like to bring parents in Australia short-term, long-term. And obviously now it is starting to get more and more realistic to bring them in. Let's start a little bit about conceptual and visas and everything. And guys, if you would like to ask any specific questions, please feel free to drop your question in the chat, and we will be just doing this session nice and easy, like a friendly session. So no problem, I'm available and I'm happy to comment on anything. So here we go. Parents visas. A lot of parents are very reluctant, I would say, from my practical experience working with clients, to move very quickly. So parents would like to explore first, Australia, see what's what, and maybe move in the long term. And that is a good idea to test the waters, to bring them on a temporary basis through the visitor visa. So visitor visa, depending on the country of origin of your parent, passport country and where they are locating, there may be quite a few options, but at this moment of time you can potentially arrange this visitor visa and bring parents in Australia with the exemption. The only big point here is the parent has to be fully vaccinated, and only with eligible vaccine that is accepted in Australia. So for those of you who are watching me from Europe, specifically Russia, Ukraine, etc., in these countries there are some specific vaccines that are not currently on the list for Australia, and obviously in this case let's make it very difficult choice what to do, whether to wait and see if this vaccine will be at some point on the list, or basically get another vaccine that it is eligible and make the way to Australia. So at this moment of time, choice is yours, obviously, because it's a very hard choice. There is no right or wrong answer on that. But it is possible. For example, if your parent is fully vaccinated, you can apply for visitor visa, apply for exemption based on the fact that the parent has child in Australia who is Australian citizen or permanent resident, and this is adult child, so over 18. So any other people who are currently in Australia and would like to see parents or bring parents for a short term, unfortunately they cannot do it because of these restrictions. So you need to make your hard choice whether to go back yourself or just to wait. So for this process, when the parent is allowed to come to Australia on a visitor visa, obviously it's down to flights availability and further border restrictions. So be careful, because for those who are watching the recent news, there was very harsh decision to announce reopening the borders for visitors, especially parents on the visitor visas, and then any other visas from the 1st of December, and then the borders were again postponed to open. Hence the flight may have some opportunities to change from economy class to business class. So you need to be really careful on that. So if you arrange your visitor visa for your parent, for example, if your parent is coming and they're happy, what's possibility of next steps? So there are two big groups of visas for parents' visa to stay for long term. Permanent visa I will be talking about. The reason for that is temporary visas may not work anymore, because the processing time for temporary parents' visas are the same pretty much as a permanent. So what's the point of lodging a temporary visa application? So for permanent parents' visas, there are options to lodge for parents who are considered young, so under 66.5 years of age, or so-called aged parent visa. So for young parents, you can possibly lodge from Australia, but in this case the bridging visa to keep the legal status in Australia for this parent will not be granted, and that's obviously a big miss. For aged parent visas, the bridging visa will be granted, and in this case you will be able to keep your parent with you for the whole duration of the processing time. So let's discuss what sort of visas are available. Subclass 103, so that's the visa for offshore applicant, any age, and the duration of processing may take 15 odd years. Why do you think it still exists? Because you can still put your application in the queue and later on, for example, convert this visa into, say, aged parent visa. I'll explain later how we work with that. Then 143, contributory parent visa. It's a permanent residency at the end of the process, and also any parent of any age will be eligible. So this visa can be applied from offshore or in Australia, but if you're applying in Australia for 143, you will not get bridging visa. That's a big miss. Contributory visa is a so-called, expensive visa for parent, where at the end again of the process, you will be liable to pay pretty high government fees. So 43,600 per adult parent. Hence, if you are planning to bring two parents, it will cost you around 100,000. So it's a pretty significant amount. If we're talking about aged parent visas, so these applications has to be lodged from Australia. So you have to bring your parent in Australia, and usual way to bring the parent in Australia is visitor visa to start. For the visitor visa, you need to make sure this visitor visa is granted without any restriction. So no condition 8503 is imposed, which you cannot really influence, but you need to be mindful. So if there is no condition, no restrictions, and the parent is eligible, you can possibly apply for aged parent. For aged parent category, we again have two streams. One is contributory, again with significant investment from your side at the end of processing, or non-contributory visa, where the processing may take 10 odd years. So in this case, it's your judgment call what to do, because I would like to remind you, when you're applying for parents' visas, and even if you're applying from Australia, you will not get Medicare for them at all at lodgement, only when the visa is granted. So you need to weigh your risks, obviously in regards to health of the parent and age of the parent, because the reason for that is if your parent will become sick, especially on the long term, it may cost you really significant amount to keep the parent in the hospital, etc. So in this case, if your parent is aged, and if you come into Australia to lodge parents' visa from Australia, my best advice would be to consider top health cover. Reason for that is just to save yourself from headache and stress, and obviously significant bill if any bad thing may happen. Tell you the story. I have a parent who came during the pandemic and obviously get stuck here, so we managed to remove the no further stay condition for her, and then we were extending her stay for another visitor visa and considering any options for further. And during her stay, unfortunately, one health insurance expired, and they were thinking which insurance company they can possibly go through. And during that 2 weeks window, when the parent has no insurance at all, unfortunately, the parent got sick and went to the hospital, and it was absolutely terrible, devastating situation for the family. And they end up with $25,000 bill. Obviously, the parent is back at home now, but that's the reminder to back yourself up with insurance. That's 100% definite. Hello. In regards to parents visa, if you have aged parent and manage to apply for aged parent visa, that's basically a brilliant idea. Then the parents will stay with you on a bridging visa associated with this application and will be in Australia for the processing time. So contributory aged parent visa usually take 4 to 5 years. Hence, your assessment as a sponsor, financial assessment, parents' health assessment, and police clearance assessment will be at the end of this process. And that's a very, very good proactive approach if you will be considering checking your health of your parent pretty much at least once a year. Again, I have a story for that for you too. For example, I have a couple who claimed that they didn't have any problems with health, and we apply for 143 visa. So it's a contributory parents visa, but from offshore. And then, lucky for us, we were arranging at the same time long-term visitor visa for them to come and wait for the decision. And in this case, we had to go through medical assessment for both of the parents. During medical assessment, it was revealed that one of the parents had a very, very early stage of lung cancer, and lucky for him, he's been operated and already, recovering. So that is really good checkpoint how sometimes you may not know what's happening with your parent or yourself even. And then something may be revealed through the medical examination. So for those who are applying for parents visa anyway, my best advice would be to just continue checking your parents at least once a year to make sure everything is fine. Also, aged parent visa has a definitive advantage when you bring in parent from overseas here and basically keeping them here during the whole processing time. Reason for that is if anything goes wrong with health of the parent, obviously the parent still will be here, and even if the visa will be rejected, you will have a chance to go to tribunal to appeal for the decision, and at the same time still keeping your parent with you and looking after them. So in this case, you can then even take it to the minister intervention in case if appeal will not be successful, but yet the parent will be still in Australia. So it's a good idea to plan ahead, especially if you have something going on or possibly will be going on with health issues, because health issues is one of the main criteria for parents' visas assessment. And again, health criteria will be only assessed at the end of the process. And if the parent is not satisfying the health criteria, the visa is likely to be rejected, and then you will have an option to go to tribunal. But if at time of rejection your parent is overseas, then you don't have any visa option apart from normal temporary visas to come over, but you can appeal yourself as a sponsor. In terms of health assessment and Medicare, obviously during the processing of parents visa, there is no Medicare entitlement even if you lodge your application from Australia. Obviously that's a big miss, but that's how the legislation is operating. And then at the same time, if you're gonna be considering coming to Australia, you need to see which way you can come, even if your application is in the queue. Let's consider this scenario when you have not aged parent but you want to keep them here. So what can be done in this case? If parent, for example, is young in terms of our legislation, and in this case, obviously, it's going to be a long wait if you don't lodge the application at all. So my strategic planning and my strategic applications for this type of cases is the following. So first, we can consider lodging even 103 visa. What's the reason for that, you would say? It's just to secure a place in the queue, especially if the parent is young enough, and obviously there are young parents, In this case, they may not consider, relocating in the nearest future, but time flies, and then if your application is in the queue, obviously the queue process depends on the time when you lodge. Then you're just securing your queue and forgetting about this application for a while. And when, for example, in a 5-year time, they will be ready finally to go, then you have decision ready case. So I have just recently done the following cases. So we had the application in the queue for 103 from offshore for around 5 years, and finally the sponsor and the parents decided they are ready to make a move. And what we've done, well, I may call it convert, but we just basically relodge another application for 143 visa. But because our application already been in the queue from 103 visa, the queue stayed in the favor of my client, and basically in this case the client got the processing fairly quickly. We've got the stage 2 processing, assessing the sponsor and medicals and police clearances in less than 6 months from the application for 143 visa. And in this case, obviously clients were lucky enough to finalize all the process through COVID and had an opportunity to come over because there was permanent residency visa. Another possibility of not aged parent to come and stay is through this following several options of the visa. So first, the candidates may lodge 143 visa, so it's permanent residency visa application, where the processing time may take now around 5 to 6 years. Then, if you would like to consider coming to Australia and staying, there is a couple of options. First, so-called long-term visitor visa, when your parent can come and stay in Australia for 12 months out of 18. So what does that mean? You can keep your parent for up to 12 months without coming and going, and then as a visa condition, they will have to go offshore and stay in the home country. After 6 months, they may be able to come again for another year. So this visa is usually granted for 3 years, with the opportunity to come for 1 year, stay offshore for 6 months, and then come back for another year. That's a very budget option to keep parent for up to 2 years in Australia. Again, health insurance is on you, of course. If you would like to keep your parent without coming and going in Australia for, say, 5 years' time or up to 10 years' time, in this case, the other visa subclass comes handy. It's 870 visa. On this visa, you will be assessed as a formal sponsor, and obviously you will have formal responsibilities, obligations. In this case, compared to visitor visa, where, for example, if the child of the parent does not work, for example, and mind the kids and the husband works, then you can still invite your parents easy on the visitor visa. For 870 visa, you will not be allowed not to work as a sponsor of your parent. You will have to have certain income, and you have to be in Australia on a certain status, again, permanent resident or Australian citizen. And you have to be physically in Australia for at least 4 years. So that's push the application for this particular type visa for quite a while. Because on a normal occasion, if you're considering sponsoring your parent for permanent residency, you have to satisfy a so-called settlement rule, where you yourself need to be a resident in Australia for at least 2 years, and you have to be at time of application in the right status, at least permanent resident or Australian citizen. So a lot of people had a misconception that you had to be permanent resident for 2 years. That's not correct. So for example, a lot of people who come in here and stay in here on a student visa, then temporary work visa, and then finally make it to permanent residency, still can use all these years of staying in Australia on a variety of temporary visas as part of assessment criteria for either 2 years residency or 4 years residency. So if you're coming or bringing your parent, if you're bringing your parent on 870 visa, then you can arrange your parent to stay for 3, 5 or up to 10 years in a row. It's a quite expensive visa, but at the same time it allows parent to stay on a longer duration, and it works especially for parents who don't mind living in country and live here already, waiting for their status. So in this case, you need to bear in mind that you have to arrange health insurance as a part of this visa. That's first. And then if your parent is already on this visa, then you will not be allowed to convert this visa in Australia for any other visa. That's also a big limitation. So in this case, I would choose a strategy to apply for permanent residency first and then arrange 870 visa if needed to bring and keep the parent in Australia. There are a couple of other options for parents, especially if parent is single, and I had these scenarios before through pandemic, especially for those who were stuck in Australia, and finally they even managed to get temporary and now waiting for permanent residency while in Australia. So guess what type of visa is that? It's a classic scenario of partner visa. So some parents who were coming in Australia during the pandemic got stuck because of the borders were closed, and they were extending visitor visas for the reason of keeping the status legal in Australia. And in this case, one of my clients managed to get a partner during the pandemic on the visitor visa, and then they simply start living together and collect the whole evidence package, the same as any normal couple who will be applying for partner visa would do. In this case, obviously, the parent got temporary visa on the first instance, but it obviously easing the process because of the costs, and the parent is getting Medicaid lodgement for partner visa lodgement. So it's a very convenient way for those who really would like to, I would say, start afresh and find a partner when you're coming on a visit, because parents can arrange just visitor visa long term to come for up to 1 year, and during this time, if the parent is single and if the opportunity will arise, they can potentially consider partner visa. The other big question I was asked before my live session for parents visa is balance of family test. What does that mean? So for parents visas, 103, 143, 864 age parent contributory, 804 age parent non-contributory. For all of these visas, the balance of family test is applicable. So what does it mean? It means that the majority of children that a parent or a couple, if parent is obviously partnered, has to be in Australia at least as permanent residents or Australian citizens. And there are scenarios when, say, one child is in Australia and any other children are somewhere else and nobody else would like to make a way to Australia. So what can be done in these scenarios if obviously parents would like to come and relocate? A couple of options really, depending on the skill of the parent. It can be even employed sponsored visa, and depending on the age, your parent may possibly make it even to permanent residency, but it should be a really young parent, because we have an age limitation as 45 on a normal occasion, and then regional programs may take up to 50, 55 the most. So that's the scenario, and I have a couple of clients who are working in Australia being a parent and still working on the temporary visas, just keep renewing those. So that's not a big problem. The other possible way to avoid balance of the family test will be business visas. If your parents are running a business, you can avoid not classic parents visa scenario and just move to business visas, business owner or investor or entrepreneur. The other, I would say, tricky option may be to go up to the Minister of Migration to seek granting so-called special substituted 600 visa in order to avoid balance of family test whatsoever. But it's not as simple, because in order to reach minister, you need to make certain steps to basically, technically, with lodgement to be compliant with all the requirements. So, in order to reach minister at this point, the parent has to come to Australia and have any visa rejection in order to appeal the decision, and then if decision is negative, which is the goal, then you have a right to appeal that decision at the minister level. And on the minister level, you will have to seek this substituted 600 visa in order to lodge parents visa. So that is permissible way, but obviously it's a lot of rejections and parents will not be happy to do that, and they will have to stay in Australia for the whole processing from first step to ministerial intervention, where, you know, not all of parents would love to be locked, you know, without any certainty for at least maybe a year and a half, maybe 2. So that's the way to bring the parent here, and then obviously to even avoid balance of family test in order to apply for residency visa later. So as you can see, it's a lot of scenarios, and very long time ago, I would say around 9 or 10 years ago, parents used to be included as an immediate family members for the purpose of visa application, and they used to be allowed to be included if it's a parent who is single and who was financially dependent on the primary applicant. Now there is no case anymore like this. And if we're talking about potential timeline for the parents to come when say children were doing migration themselves, a lot of people are going now through temporary visa first and then making their way to permanent residency, which on a normal occasion may take around 4 years. So when this is done and when the child achieved permanent residence, in this case they can possibly apply for their parents to come to Australia on the long term through parents visa stream. In this case, the waiting time for the parents visa can also take around 5 to 6 years. So roughly, if you guys or whoever is going to be watching will be making your way to permanent residency in Australia, on the average occasion, then you will be able to bring to physically bring your parents for good in about 10 years after your successful migration now, because a lot of people, as I said, were going through temporary visa. So it's quite a scary timeline, so to say, because it seems to be quite long. But on the other side, what I would like to say, that you need to consider all this option. If parents now does not want to come to Australia in this very instance, that's still a good way and good logic to have this application on the pipeline, because you will not be required to pay this big amount of government fee if you will not take the opportunity and later withdraw the application, as an example. But you will only be required to pay this government fee, big amount of government fee, only when the application will be ready to decide and positive decision will be on the way. So a lot of people was thinking they pay, say, 50,000 per parent upfront, and then without knowing what's going to be happening in the future. So that's not the case. If you're considering parents' visa, roughly for 2 parents to lodge application, you may have around 5,500 Australian dollars government fee to secure your spot in the queue. And then obviously keeping in mind that if you chose contributory visa type, then in around 5 to 6 years you will be potentially liable to pay for government fees only when the application is positively decided. Right, I have a question here. Thank you very much. Let's see. Let's review it. Migrated and 489 over 2 years. Well, you're going to apply for permanent residency in February. Yeah, that's... The question is applicant sponsor is currently on a temporary visa, and application for permanent visa will possibly be lodged in February 2022, and obviously this sponsor haven't seen his mom for a bit, long time, 2 years, and the question is whether she will be able to come. So first of all, just give you a bit of timing from my personal experience. 887, it's permanent residency visa, may be processed at around year and a half, maximum 2 years. So it's a quite extensive backlog of these visas now. Therefore, we may not expect very quick turnaround of this visa, which is a miss, because once you get your permanent residency status, obviously you will be eligible to get your parent for temporary or permanent visa. So there is no real opportunity to speed it up, but the good idea is to prepare the application to lodge on time when you're due, just to at least do your best to secure your place in the queue, and then see what's going to happen. For 870 visa, you can't apply for this visa, because for this visa you have to be a sponsor who is on the right status in Australia, meaning permanent resident or Australian citizen. So until you get your permanent residency, you will not be eligible to be a sponsor for 870. In regards to visitor visa, if you remember, guys, there was a lot of discussion that Australia will be reopening borders for visitors, which is partially true now, because parents can come on the visitor visas, but you see, everything is limited in terms of parents of who, what status should the child have. And second, yes, it is a visitor visa, but just normal, humble visitors cannot still come to Australia. So while you're going to be waiting for your 887 visa, bear in mind that this new ruling for the 1st of December that was postponed until the 15th of December may be applicable for you to come and go if you're fully vaccinated, so you can make your way back home and then peacefully come back. Otherwise, you need to wait for this time when the visitor visas will be reopened for everybody, to include your mom as a non-immediate family member as per exemption application now, and then consider her visitor visa application when it happens. And when it happens, nobody simply knows, because the current situation is very volcanic eruption, and the news contradict each other sometimes, or we're having several news through the week and the situation change very rapidly. So for those who are considering parents visa and bringing parents anytime soon, we soon will be posting some very special guide I created myself. It's a very, I would say, useful piece of document to show you what sort of steps you need to consider to bring your parent at least as a visitor now in Australia. So watch this space, because we're going to be posting, I believe, in all of our social media how you're going to get it. If you guys don't have any more questions, I may finish my discussion about parents visa for now. If you have any more questions, please do post, otherwise I will be finishing in a minute. So the process in time of parents visa, I'd like to remind you all that these especially not a problem. So especially for permanent visas has certain caps, so certain places per year, and that's how you can see the constant increase of applications and increase in time, because a lot of people applying obviously, but it's not enough places in the queue for all the parents. Interestingly enough, one more thing, that when people were considering that it's pretty high price to pay for parents visa in the eyes of sponsor and the child, department thinks differently, because average parent costs the government in, through the lifetime of the parent coming in Australia, say in late 50th, and then live all the rest of the life here fresh and unlikely to be working or earning a lot. So government is roughly estimating a spend of 300,000 per parent who is coming to Australia under parents visa program. So just consider that, because that's how the government is justifying maybe not including a lot of places for this program. Reason for that is this obvious costs through Medicare, through anything that the parent may consume when coming to Australia. So thank you very much, guys. I appreciate for those who came and joined me in this session. It was a very lovely conversation, I believe, and we have a couple of questions. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you very soon.